Did you know something new is invented every 10 minutes? Join us as we speak to the innovators reinventing our world here on planet Earth and far, far beyond. Welcome to GTWN Now, a podcast brought to you by the Global Telecom Women's Network and sponsored by CMS Global. GTWN Now introduces the movers and the makers at the cutting edge of technology who are committed to keeping us all connected. In each episode, we invite a leading expert to share her experience building life-changing inventions in places and spaces that don't yet exist, and the inspiration they must muster to tackle the impossible. We also ask our guests to share tips, tools, and strategies to reach your own moonshot. I'm your host, Rosalia Gitau, founder of Bixi, FinTech for Women, and Global Telecom Women's Network International Board member. Welcome to GTWN Now.
Welcome back to the GTWN Now podcast series. I'm Candace Johnson, founder of the GTWN. I want to thank you for joining us for another exciting episode where we build the future with the technology we have today. So we are very delighted, and it's kind of fun to be turning tables on you, Rosalia, to have with us today our GTWN producer and editor-in-chief of the podcast series. This is great fun. And she's going to be talking about Hotspots. But I wanted to remind everybody that the theme for our Mobile Century publication and also for our podcast this year is Future Forward, Shaping the Future of Global Connectivity. And with that, we are now going to turn to Rosalia. But before we do that, I just want to tell you a little bit about Rosalia. She has an amazing career, so many facets. So she's definitely a global champion of digital and financial literacy for women. She is a FinTech executive, attorney, author, and humanitarian, and is the founder and CEO of Bixi, an award-winning fintech company recognized as the top fintech in Asia. So she has over 15 years of international law, diplomacy, and finance in Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and the Americas, with the United Nations, Alibaba, Sherman and Sterling, LLP, and the governments of the USA, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. She is the author of Hotspots, the novel for which she was a PEN Award nominee, and the co-founder of the Humanitarian Women's Network, the largest global network of women in international affairs. And, I might also say that I was always very impressed with Rosalia because I think one of her mentors was Warren Christopher, who I knew very well when I was living in Washington, D.C., and was really one of the great statesmen. Rosalia is a visiting fellow at Zinc Venture Capital, a United Nations University and Brookings Institution scholar, and she sits on the board of HWN and the Global Telecom Women's Network, where she is also our Secretary General. She holds a BA from UCLA, an MSc from the London School of Economics, and a JD from New York University School of Law. On top of all of this, my dear friends, she is a world record holding mountaineer, fencer, and runner living in Australia with her 3 daughters, 2 Labradors, and 1 husband, in that order. She hails from the Philippines and Kenya by way of California. So, Rosalia, welcome to being on the other side of the show.
It's unnerving. I'm so used to, asking the questions and getting the information. But it is such a pleasure, obviously, to be on the other side of you. Candace, I love having all the conversations that we have, I always walk away more knowledgeable and more inspired. So here's hoping that
Well,
here's hoping that maybe there could be not the reverse, but maybe the audience can walk away based on your amazing questions that I'm sure you're going to relay, and some of my insights, that they'll also walk away inspired and energized.
absolutely. So, the we ask all of our members and then also other experts and leaders to contribute articles to the Mobile Century. And this year, you did a great article called Hotspots: Crises and Opportunities of the Future Forward. Now, I have to say that this article was, I think, it was finished in end of January, and of course before everything kind of exploded as we are now experiencing. And and you were very brave because you kind of projected the year 2036 vis-a-vis current data on demographics, economies, and technologies. So I guess in retrospect, what an amazing article. But why did you decide to write this piece? And what do you think the future holds? And we won't hold you to any of this, even though it is being recorded.
Absolutely, hold me to it. Funnily enough, just a bit of backstory. Yesterday, I am an avid reader, subscriber to The Economist. They know I am their biggest #1 fan. And I keep every single issue. I've been a subscriber. I'm not going to date myself, but I've been a subscriber for over 20 years. And I keep every single issue. Obviously, with the moves, some have been lost. But just yesterday, I was like, I'm going to pull up. Every year they have their kind of world in review and their projection for the next year.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And I thought, I'm going to pull up and, an old issue and see how accurate they were. And what was interesting is one of the reasons why I've been such a long time subscriber is because it's not a hyperbolic publication. It's focused on data and analyses. So a lot of the predictions were on spot, or they tracked. And of course, something, because they don't project specific events, they look at underlying demographic, economic trends, and then project an overall picture. It's not saying there's going to be this war, there's going to be these things. We're literally on the track right now. And that's where we're going. And that's effectively what I did. So I looked at my own article, my own piece a few days ago. And I found that I think most of it still tracks because it's about where are we now? And if we continue to do the same thing, which we are, unfortunately, for better or worse, we are going to see that outcome. So demographically, we know there's a certain amount of population. We know we age and are birthed at a certain rate. So if we maintain that same trajectory, we know that 20% of this, this age demographic is not going to be there. What are the impacts of, the higher echelons and the lower echelons of those age demographics are not going to be there? What are the impacts on our society? And how do we start preparing for that now? We know that wealth disparity is increasing, and we're increasingly looking at living in a K-shaped economy. Thomas Piketty, the economist, was outlining this. He literally wrote this Bible book, for 13 years ago. And he's like, this is happening. It's still happening, and it's happening increasingly rapidly. What does the world look like? I'd also like to premise, why do I care about what's happening in 10 years? I was inspired in part by this online trend, this kind of like TikTok trend of nostalgia that was happening. It was like, what were you doing in 2016? And so everybody would post, what were they doing in 2016? And, I posted, I was, of course, like running some marathon somewhere. It was in Myanmar. It was in Myanmar. And I'm like, oh, that's funny. My gosh, I've aged. That was only 10 years ago. That's a clear indication of aging. It seemed like it was yesterday. But why this nostalgia, I thought? Why 2016 is such an arbitrary year? But the nostalgic, I think, stemmed from, one of the greatest changes that happened in our lives, which was COVID. And it was kind of like, there was pre-COVID life, then post-COVID life, T1, T2. We know that we're going to have a T1, T2 event in the next 10 years, right? And the question is, based on our current trajectory, how is that going to impact? We know something is going to happen that's going to fundamentally change things. But given what we're currently doing, where are we going to end up in 10 years? And why that's additionally interesting to me is because I have small children. So I'm constantly thinking about what is their life in 10 years? What is their life in 20 years? What is their life when they graduate university or whatever education is going to be feasible for them? And how do we prepare for them for that now? So I not only have an intellectual interest, I have a very vested interest in what happens. And so I write this piece from the professional perspective, but really, I also write it as a parent. I am day to day trying to figure out how can I best prepare you for this world and what data and evidence supports that.
Yeah.
And it's really imminent things.
Yes. No, I think that's very helpful. How did you get the title Hotspots? Because it's also the title of your novel. So I'm
clearly obsessed with that title. I got the title from my mentor, Warren Christopher. So short story long, he taught a very small 20-person seminar at UCLA in the early 2000s. Voila, I just dated myself. And I see one of my he was my initial course mates. And I saw him crossing the greens and I said, Kevin, what are you up to? He's like, oh, I just got into Warren Christopher's seminar. Yeah, it's all closed. There's absolutely no space. Everybody wants to get into it. And I'm like, me too. And he's like, no, you don't understand. This is like a 6-month waiting list. I'm like, yeah, me too. So I just basically compelled myself in. Somebody might have got sick. Who knows? There might have been an accident. No, everybody was fine. But I did manage to squeeze a place for myself. That's how I met Warren Christopher. I was so passionate about how he was teaching this course, which was basically, he walked us through all of the hotspots that he encountered while acting Secretary of State and really treated the course as, this is a situation room. These are all of the factors. This is real life. This is how we deal with problems. Let's come up with solutions. Let's look at some of the data that was around during that period. Let's project some outcomes. He had a checkered past as a Secretary of State. One of the things that happened that he himself had talked as, a regrettable instance was Rwanda happened kind of under his tenure, right? But it was all there for us to discuss, discern, hindsight is 2020, but what is the data set that's available now? And what are the best decisions we can make right now? And I just love that way of case studying things, looking at what are the most striking problems, what are the hotspots that we deal with, and how can we look at the prevailing data and make really critical and immediate decisions. This isn't academia. We're not going to think about it for ages, which is fair. There's a place for that. But sometimes as decision makers, industry leaders, government leaders, we have to make the next right move. And that can be really difficult, but we have our responsibilities to look at the prevailing data and say, I think this is the next right move, and then communicate that adequately to the public. So that's how Hotspots started. And then it just became this, I guess, a paradigm through which I started to explore things. Everything is a hotspot. It's global affairs is the most obvious, but I think even in business, we have hotspots. AI is the new hotspot, right? The space is finally kind of becoming the new hotspot. Yeah, preaching to the choir here.
It always was, but
always was.
But for everybody
now,
else,
I'm seeing the salience. You see that salience. And I think maybe hotspots is that. Hotspots is like a more urgent word for salience. Salience is the ether of things that are happening and we're talking about. And hotspots is saying, this is important. I can't ignore it anymore. I need to deal with it. And I need to discern the next best move with the available information that I have.
So it's so interesting, Rosalia, thank you, that you talk about data sets and, and the information and the communication and everything. And I think one of the most shocking revelations that we have found out in the last 2 weeks was the bombing of the school and in Iran, and that all of these children died, and afterwards, they said that they had bad data, and you just kind of sit here and go, how in the world can anybody, but particularly the United States, have made such a mistake? I just want, so we're talking about technology and we're talking about AI,
Absolutely.
but and the data sets, people, have been talking about, bias and everything in AI, but for sure they must have been using AI. And for sure the data set was totally wrong. So just curious as to going forward, how do you think that we are perhaps going to be able to use technology to avoid terrible mistakes like this and also improve, our lives and the lives of your children?
So there's a famous saying in the world of data, which we know. I'll refrain from the profanity, but it's basically ish in, ish out. You can have whatever fancy AI algorithm, if it's crap going in, it's crap going out. And so I think fundamentally, as with everything, and this is also discussed in my piece on hotspots and the projections for 2036, now, I mean, 2036, more than ever, trust is fundamental for this entire technological edifice to stand up. We cannot do it if we cannot have the stuff going in from trusted interlocutors, trusted thinking people. We will get the exact same outcome when it comes out. So that's how I would say that's the beginning. That's how to begin at the beginning. You have to start with who is the who of it, the actual human being. So in this regard, I mean, this is the optimism regarding AI. We can't all be worked out of a job. We have to do, as the humans in the equation, we have to do the job of figuring out how to create trust, build trust, and pipeline that then into the technology that provides the analysis that can then help us. But without that trust, it's just ish in, ish out. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, I'm just curious, what do you think? I mean, everybody is talking about AI, and we were just at the Mobile World Congress, and, you could not go to a stand without there being, an AI solution, et cetera. But I have lived this before. I was in the internet bubble in 2000, and everything, this was the time of pet rocks and, all of this stuff. And I saw so much money actually being squandered on things that I knew, and I tried to tell people that this is not good, and people would not listen. So I'm just curious, what do you think is going to be the next technology after AI? And believe me, I have also, because of satellites and my role in space, we have been using, algorithms and machine learning on all of the data that we have collected, from all of these sensors that, around the world via satellite. So, for me, it's kind of nothing new, but just curious to see your perspective on AI and the next technologies.
Well, I want to be optimistic.
Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. Absolutely. You have to be optimistic. Yes.
One of the great things about being the host of this podcast is I get to interview some of the most incredible industry leaders in AI. And this is not a shameless plug, but I need everybody to check out the episode that I did with Rachel Free. So she's a patent attorney and a PhD scientist in AI. So she gets it all. And one of the things that she really made me understand is a lot of people don't really understand the technology, including their companies making the technology, right? Because her job is not only to create it, her job is then to unpack it as a patent attorney and explain how everything works, right? That expertise is like a handful of people. So to your point, all this AI stuff, that second layer stuff, sure, it's great. But that underlying, only a handful of people really get it. And all of this bubble around it, that's all going to burst. The core is going to be there, just like the internet did come, but is it this moment? Not necessarily. So that she actually made me feel a lot better. I was, because I'm like, oh, what is it? I don't think we're quite there yet. I mean, I use a number of the AI chat tools and we're not there yet.
Yeah.
There's a lot of issues that happen. But mainly we're not there yet because the backbone of it, very few brainiacs truly, truly, truly understand. And even those who do understand, they actually are the ones who say, we're not even quite there. And I don't even know what I don't know yet. To your point about what happens, what do I think is the next technology? I hate to say it, but it's military tech. We're seeing it. We're seeing it. We're seeing it not only in the technology that's coming out, we're seeing it reflected in stock prices in the market. In some regards, that's kind of good for space because, it creates a commercial case for space, which has been not elusive, but a challenge, a challenge. And now it's like, well, there's a case, a case made, and we're again seeing that reflected in stock prices in the stock market. And then that's the salience, that's the ether. We are heading arguably away from 80 years of sustainable peace into a new era. And whether it's, kind of preventative, defensive, or offensive, there is increased military spending across government budgets, et cetera, and that will be manifested in military tech. Now, is military tech going to take on its kind of own, instead of like FinTech, it's MilTech, right? That's to some extent, a rebranding exercise. But that being said, prior wars have been these leaps in technology that subsequently can have dual use, of course, which is going to be, great. But I do think it's going to be more than just cosmetic. We're already seeing in my lifetime, and I'm, haven't lived through several wars. War is being fought so differently. I remember in 2010 introducing drone technology to, a displacement refugee crisis in Haiti. And it was like, wow, you can take pictures. Now, look how drones are being used. I mean, that is standard practice and anybody can make one, which is exciting. A drone can also be used to bring your iced coffee in Shenzhen. But, I think military tech, and we get to see their advertisements, right? We're watching some of their advertisements right now in the theaters of war. So I think that's really going to have its moment over the next 3 to 5 years. And then the ethical question is, do you invest in that direction? That's up to our listeners to discern. I'm curious, actually, what do you think? What do you think is the next big tech thing?
So Rosalia, I'm definitely one, possibly 2 generations older than you. And I come from a family where my father was in the military and did the first built the first satellites. And he was the head of telecommunications for the military in the United States. So, and this was already, starting late 50s, early 60s. And so I've really seen a pendulum because, he was in World War II. He was in the Korean War, and he was in the Vietnam War. But always telecommunications was, what he was doing. And so, late 50s, early 60s, it was definitely all telecommunications was military. And that was where, and then so they were doing things like fiber optics. They were doing things like mobile communications, cellular communications. They were doing things like satellite technology, etc. And then you see the pendulum kind of starting to move. And in the mid 80s, you then had all of the large commercial corporations, the Boeings, the Lockheed Martins, the Raytheons, etc., who are starting to bring innovation from the private sector to the military. And then today, we are indeed seeing that pendulum swing back to where it was, where the military needs are once again inspiring different types of technology, etc. So I very much have this kind of long perspective. I think also one thing that when my father was in Vietnam, and we were living in Hawaii. That was nice for us. I went to this famous school called Punahou, which is where President Barack Obama went.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, and it was a fabulous school. And so this was 1968. So I would wear peace beads to school. And everybody said, Candace, you can't wear peace beads. Your father is a general fighting for the United States Air Force. And so I told everybody, I said, no, I said, my father is fighting for peace, which I really believe. And it's kind of also what you are saying, Rosalia, that people have to stand up and they have to fight for what they believe in and what they believe the values are, etc., and to defend those who cannot, defend themselves from tyranny. And so what I do hope is that with all of these technologies, that we really will have then the autonomous systems, and that, if we have wars between robots, then, that's great because we will not have loss of life. And so many times wars have been started, unfortunately, and we are seeing that still very much today because of economic reasons. And so if those economic reasons can then be fought out by autonomous systems and life can be saved, then I think this would be something that's very good and something certainly that I'm involved in. For me, I'm working very hard now on the quantum technologies.
Yes.
And so, and I think what's interesting is that the quantum technologies, with this idea of entanglement, etc., is starting to be being used by, just recently, there was a group of ASEAN countries who had a problem. They could not get it solved. And so they used, the entanglement theories of quantum technology to solve the problem. And everybody came around the table in a peaceful way and solved the problem. So I think there is definitely hope. I think you're definitely right, though, that it's not the technologies that is going to, solve the problem. It is the people, and that is really the most important thing that we must all keep, front and center. I'm curious, we were together now at the Mobile World Congress, and indeed, as I said, we saw a lot of AI. Did you see anything while you were walking around or in your discussions which made you believe that perhaps people are, focusing on this human side, this human element?
Actually, I was very pleasantly surprised that, in fact, this year, I don't know if you felt the same way. I think there were more humanistic applications showcased than last year.
Yeah.
And I was like, even one of our fellow GTWN board members, Anna Lotobidier, she came up to me. She's like, more interesting people for you this time around. Really? And I thought, yeah, because, background is, as some of you know, Bixie, we do financial literacy education for financial and digitally excluded populations. So, it's private company, but with a socially impactful outcome. And this year, there were many, in the financial literacy space, digital inclusion space. Female health really featured rather prominently, and health tech in general. I was, and it made me wonder, there wasn't a major swing in investment going to this. I almost, this is, conjecture, but I almost wonder if certain events that kicked off 2025 almost created that resistance movement among young people that basically have to become in charge to bring a brighter future. Because I definitely noticed that was a much more present than it was last year. So I thought that was really encouraging. Obviously, this year, one of the big differences was lower attendance because a number of Spain's largest tech conference got stuck in. A lot of people traveling from around the world have to go through the Middle East, Dubai, Doha, Abu Dhabi, and they either got stuck in those airports, couldn't make it, got rerouted. So that was very much also top of mind and top of talking points among so many people who are like, oh, sorry, my colleague couldn't be here. Or, it was a handful of our colleagues were kind of like temporarily displaced in Spain because they are originally from Doha. And that kicked off, I think, this maybe the year prior, people kept thinking, let the good times roll. It's going to be tech in a vacuum, and everyone's going to kind of keep hitting trajectories. And I think the world of tech, which is generally we're optimists, right? Like whatever our differences are, it's a community of optimists. I think that optimism started to really hit reality, that the foundation of our optimistic builds was changing, and that we probably had to start doing something differently about it and not just go into our holes and like code out a solution, that wasn't going to fix the underlying problems. So in that case, I was really encouraged. And just, our board meeting, for example, obviously, I think a lot of people needed to emote about the prevailing circumstances. But one of the key outcomes was that, what can we do? These are a room full of people who are doers. We're not sayers, we're doers. And I think what we can do is exactly what we're doing now and exactly what the audience is listening to now. The way the algorithm works, we have to start making more noise. We can't be drowned out by the noisemakers that are creating these circumstances where innovation cannot thrive, where humans cannot thrive, where women cannot thrive, when our children cannot thrive. We have to start pushing the algorithm to carry our perspective across too, because I know that the optimists are the majority. I know that dreamers are the majority. I know that women, data-wise, we are the majority. I know that we just need to be able to reach our audiences, make them feel like it is salient and that there is another perspective, rather than what I am seeing and what the data is also suggesting is increasing apathy and the word nihilism being thrown around a lot, specifically when talking about Gen Z and that Gen Zers are up to 30 years old now. That's not nihilism. Authoritarianism thrives in nihilism and retreat. And I think this is the time when communications carried through telecoms manifests as satellite internet. That's going to be the key to the next 5 years, while in the background, a lot of other things are happening, militarily or what have you.
So, Rosalia, I think that's a beautiful way to kind of bring our podcast to an end. I would appreciate it, though, if you could tell and share with our audience what you are doing, particularly in the Philippines first, but then hopefully, throughout the world, to bring about this more humanistic aspect of a digital world.
So what we are doing at Bixi is we're working with the government and we're working with the United Nations to provide actually fun and engaging financial literacy content and pairing that with licensed financial products from our partners. So it's like, you learn, but then you're able to do something. Because one of the issues is digitally and financially excluded people, they don't think about money as the way, private investors do, right? Even though we live in a capitalist economy where money makes more money than labor. This is a point I'm constantly trying to get across to all of our audiences. As an economist, money makes more money than labor. This is a fact now. So you have to start learning the language of money. You have to start understanding interest rates, compound interest rates, and debt rates. And you have to start actually taking action slowly by slowly. That bridge, the Bixby Bridge, as we call it, this is emotion. Funnily enough, it's not knowledge. People on average know the basics. This is not rocket science, but it's the emotions around doing something, taking action, which those predominant emotions are anxiety, which is fixed actually by trust. We work on addressing the anxiety, building trust, addressing anxiety, building trust, and then we trigger them towards action. So we're doing that in the Philippines with the Philippines' largest universal basic income program. And we're looking to scale that nationally. So I just came back from the Philippines. We had a phenomenal, pre-training with all of the case managers who are going to bring this across the country. And our plan is to upscale that across the government, working with some of our GTWN board partners. But we've also now had meetings with several departments, and everyone is really excited about what we're doing. And I'm really excited about what we're doing. It's innovative. It's interesting. It still hits, one of the things that in the private sector, social impact doesn't make money. Absolutely, you can. The margins exist. What we work on is for the private actors, we bring you market. For the public actors, we give you access to financial products that are not going to be created for you. And we build the trust on both sides. We say, don't worry, we'll bring enough people so it makes money sense to you, private actors. And for the public actors, we say, these are actually verified, financial providers. It's not us, it's them. And this is why you can trust them. So we act as building that bridge in a technological way. And also by being the amazing Bixby team, I have amazing people who work with me in the Philippines. We build that trust. And now we're starting to really see that trust being manifest by the numbers. So it's an exciting time for us. I was very encouraged to see it at MWC. A number of other people are also taking this path, this kind of win-win, as our friends in the East like to call it. But there are absolutely win-wins, not only in the area of wealth disparity, which is where I work in. There are win-wins in the environment, one of the biggest challenges that we have right now. There are win-wins for the social problems that we face. My call to action for anybody listening is find the win-win. Both sides counts. I've worked on the public side. I've worked on the private side. Both sides have intense distrust of the other. It's really important to find that common ground. And sometimes, as I've seen Candace do, you have to literally pull them into the same room, use your charm, charisma, do whatever you have to do. But there is a win-win solution. Profit can be made and people can be helped. And I think it's really up to us to bridge that current chasm that we exist. But I'm really confident because I know everybody at GTWN sees that perspective. They're doing something about it all around the world. We just need to see a lot more of that.
Absolutely. I think that is absolutely the perfect note to end on. Rosalia, thank you so much for all that you are doing to help the world bridge indeed some of these chasms, to help the world use technology in a trusted way. And, on a personal note, thank you so much also for all of the work that you do for GTWN. Dear listeners, thank you for joining us. We look forward to having you be with us for another GTWN Now episode. And we wish you all the best in your endeavors. Thank you.
I want to thank our guest for joining today's episode of GTWN Now, and give a big thank you to our sponsors, CMS Global, for making this episode possible. Today's podcast will be available on our website, gtwn.org, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you'll be notified when new episodes drop. I'm your host, Rosalia Gitau, GTWN International Board Member, wishing you a week of wonder.